Ready when you are.
Okay, let's stand for pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, I'll call this work session to order. First thing on the agenda is budget updates.
If possible, I'm actually going to switch the order because we have some visitors here
Oh, all right,
who are
okay.
interested in the second item more so than the first.
Yeah, we can do that.
Lauren, did you want to give your update relative to the indexing project?
Oh, I sure can. So Maria was like, Jeff just tells us to start talking. I actually knew about this though. I sent, you made me come up here, all right. I sent Jeff an email yesterday to let him know that the back indexing project was officially completed. I think it was late last week, so they completed, they indexed 95,000 documents for us, so we're fully indexed. So we're super excited about that because the searchability is way better. And we came in about $2,300 under budget, so their estimate was good. So we are very excited about that, and now we are working on starting just an internal verification of all the indexing, primarily because some of the original indexing that was done several years back isn't to the same standards necessarily. So that's kind of what we're working on now, but we're super excited, and also just want to thank Daryl. He led the whole project. Everything went amazingly well, so we're super excited and appreciative that Daryl was able to help us.
That's wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, we're excited, so.
So just an announcement, and then we're going to talk a little bit about item number 2. So Maria, you can come up too. I don't really know, I don't really have a plan for this because we are really just kind of, we talked about this at personnel briefly, and we've been talking about it some more. I thought we were going to be at the point today of asking you kind of to put this on an agenda for approval, but we'll probably need another 2 weeks worth of work before we get to the point of saying it's ready to come to the agenda for approval. I think you have in front of you a big 11 by 17 paper that has all this data on it. So, I don't know, 2 months ago, Lauren and Maria approached me with the idea of combining those two offices to have some more flexibility and efficiency in the way that we're providing services. The key reasons why we're bringing this up is that big box in the bottom there that says benefits. And it's basically for flexibility in the use of staff, the ability to concentrate on, one thing versus another during heavy periods of time. And if we didn't do this, we would likely be looking at asking for another FTE in the assessor's office if we ran them separately. And we believe we can get by with the 10 we have allocated between the two departments if we combine them. So they drafted some ideas of what the crossover job descriptions would look like, how the recorder's office deputies would take on some of the assessment tasks, and how the assessor staff would take on some of the recording tasks. That's the part that's taken a little longer to work out. You can see the bullet points under the proposed job descriptions that kind of show a blending of the responsibilities. So we're at a point where those job descriptions have been reviewed by DDA, and we're thinking about and talking with the staff in those current positions on what it would look like to migrate to those positions, whether it would be all in one shot or whether it would be over time, or whether, what that exactly would look like. So, any other comments initially?
I don't think so.
Okay. Generally, we're looking for opportunities to do two things: be more efficient with the staff in providing service, and be more seamless to the public when they're requesting services. So a lot of the services between some of our departments mean that the public has to be directed to the right person they do part of it, then they hand it off to the next office, and they do part of it, and then it goes to the next office, and they do part of it. So while we're not really talking land records office, we are kind of talking about property records is kind of the overarching name of this new department. We would still have a statutorily named assessor. We would still statutorily name somebody as recorder because those are required. And then everybody would work under that umbrella and the workload would just be allocated as identified here by the assistant director who's also the recorder.
So prior to any of you coming on the board, this was actually a discussion with the previous board. It just wasn't the right time to implement, but we had talks even then how we could be more efficient as a county and still utilize the current staff that we have. So what Jeff just explained would be encapsulates that.
So essentially, what we have left to do is to take these numbers that we got from DDA. I don't even know if those are on the copies you have. Do you have the job grades on there?
No, we just have the,
You don't, then that's,
how it breaks down.
so we want to have a conversation with the staff to show what that looks like, to talk about how that movement would happen, what the opportunities for promotion are within that new structure. And then, of course, we have to have a conversation with the AFSCME group, who these employees are all represented by, and make sure that they have an opportunity to weigh in on that. And then we would come back at some point, I'm still assuming some point in November. Initially, I thought we'd be back next week, but it's gonna be sometime in November with an actual board action to combine, approve the job descriptions, and approve the placement of the staff within the positions. We currently have 4 staff in the recorder's office. We have 5 in the assessor's office and 1 vacancy. Remember, with the promotion of Maria from assistant to county assessor, we still have that assistant position open. Once we come up with this plan, we'll have a vacancy. We just don't know which vacancy it is yet within that. So we've got 9 people out of a complement of 10 FTE in those 2 departments right now. So that's what would come before you, would be the approval of the reorganization, the approval of the placement of people within positions. But what we have to do before that is talk individually with the staff relative to the grades and classifications we have. And of course, you know, the biggest question an employee has is, well, how does that affect me, right? And we want to take time to individually ask and answer those questions for all the employees before we bring a proposal to you.
How does that affect the 2 sitting here right in front of us right now?
So, in this proposal, Maria is the property records director, and Lauren would be the assistant director and the recorder.
Any change of pay grades?
Lauren's grade would go up, Maria's would stay where it is.
That's not correct.
That's not correct. It goes up by 1. They each went up.
Oh, they each go up, okay.
Each went up 1 grade.
They each go up 1 grade. And a big element of grading is span of control, right? So the amount of staff or work that you're responsible for, so both of those do go up. And in essence, there's an opportunity for all of the current staff within the 2 departments to ratchet up a grade, I think it's a grade or 2 in this proposal, but we haven't worked out the actual details, and the staff haven't weighed in on which of the, like the property record specialist 2 or the property record specialist 1, they're graded differently. So people who don't already have the qualification or would need to get the certification to be able to do the assessment steps would have to say, yes, I'm opting into that, and I'll get that credential within a 2-year period of time. So that would be what kind of the map we have to work through.
Would it make it smoother that the 2 of them are presented it to you, and they've already decided on who gets what?
Well, yeah, that was, I mean, we've had this conversation, we worked this all the way around, and then, then there was the day I had to look at the 2 of them. I said, what we have to figure out is what this looks like, and really this is what this looks like. The assessor is always graded in the county higher than the recorder, and that's just the way that is. So we had to come to the reality of what that looks like and how that works. So the three of us had a conversation yesterday about how do you split up the work, who does what, and then how is the chain of delegation? And of course, this is, was essentially initially their idea, and the implementation will be largely their responsibility. We'll talk through it, we'll put it on paper, we'll try to anticipate everything we can anticipate, and still day to day, delegation is probably one of the hardest leadership challenges to learn. So getting good at delegating, getting good at engaging staff to be to be engaged in their work and to be responsible for a body of work and not micromanaged as we've seen in the past, I think would be really important. But we had a good conversation about that yesterday, and we know what the next steps are. And this was already on the agenda, so I just wanted all five of you to hear this is kind of the road we're going down and the steps we have left to take.
Are there any staff reservations about it, or huge support, or?
I think we have some of each, but I think we've kind of talked through some different ways of implementation, and I think that's the biggest piece we're just trying to figure out right now. Even if let's say you guys approve this is gonna take probably 10 to 12 months to get everyone up and running and cross-trained and all that stuff. This is not going to be an immediate, as soon as you guys approve it, we merge and now everybody does everything. It can't be that way or you're gonna stress people out. So we had talked about, that's our biggest thing right now, is just trying to figure out how to implement it so that you're taking everyone's concerns and you're hearing your employees and being like, what's the best way to do this for everybody so that everybody wins, kind of county and employees. It's gotta make sense for everybody or you're not gonna get the
Does
buy-in.
everybody kind of understand the concept of what's being proposed?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And we've talked about having an opt-in so that there's options for some employees, now, later, or in time. If we approve the change, we're gonna approve the new org chart, and we're gonna approve the new job descriptions. And that would mean if somebody opted to stay where they were, they would stay where they are, but if they retire, if they leave, if anything, then we would hire into the new org chart and not the old one, right? So there would be the possibility of some element of attrition for the final changes to that.
Okay. So the only,
Go ahead.
the only pay grade changes will be the two at the top, or are there more?
There are more.
There will be more.
Yep.
Most every one of them changes.
So we talked about this in personnel, Ted and I were there, and I believe, Jeff, didn't you say if you if they had to hire more staff versus what it is, the savings is like 50% of a position?
I think if we were 11 FTE instead of the 10 we currently are, in this, we would have to add another position with benefits, and that would be $65,000 to $80,000. I think everybody ratchets up 1 or 2 grades in the proposal, and that would exactly cost about half of the cost of a new person. And it would not be an additional health contract then, is what most of the savings is.
That was the question, okay, what's?
When we know what people are thinking, we can actually put a dollar and cents to that for you. And then if we approve that in November, then we'll show that in the final edits to the budget before we get to presenting the December one. But right now, we're showing things as they were in July when we prepared the budget relative to the number of staff and the number of positions. We'll make a final adjustment when we present the December final details.
Could you maybe give some examples of what would be more efficient? And how it would streamline your operations?
Well, I think there's several processes that, like, right now, the recorder's office starts with our sales, then they bump them to our office, then they go to so recorder starts with the sales, then they go to my office to review them, then I have to review the sales. You got 3 different people touching the same thing, where we might be able to take out a middle person on half of it. So either my staff gets a certain district and they start from finish to the sale, then you have someone, either Lauren or myself, reviewing them at the very end, or vice versa. You have multiple people. Splits and combines, I think, is another one that can be, it touches so many different departments. We can probably get better at the majority of it, that still touches another department as well, so we have to try to figure out how to streamline that whole thing a little bit better. But just even, our offices have always kind of helped each other and worked together very well and worked on that stuff, but just not having to bounce from counter to counter to counter, like ownership deeds or sales transfers or different things like that, if people can answer general questions, it's just a much better, customer experience, I guess. But those are the two main things right away that come to my mind.
And there's probably some efficiencies, we're gonna talk about this next week, but I'll bring it up. We know we were talking about the intake at the jail. We also know we were talking about doing some rearrangement of space on the first floor relative to the attorney's office. And when I had Bruce Schwartzman from BKV look at that, I asked him to take a look at the second floor to see if there was anything we could do to make the west half of the second floor flow better for those 10 employees, rather than have two people up front that can't see anybody else in the back. We'd probably rotate some of that around so that everybody would feel a little more connection. And then if we have two departments up on the second floor instead of three, we wouldn't necessarily need three people sitting at the window. We could get by with two on a regular basis, and have that other person, you know, processing the piles of work, like the sales that come in, like the property changes that come in. Sometimes when you're sitting down doing that stuff, that's hard to do when you're also attending to the window. So we think that there would be significant efficiencies, and the initial bet is that it saves us an FTE.
I appreciate you guys being open to this, because in the big picture, this is a great first step. Like Shar said, it had been discussed before, and I know when Jeff first came on board, there was some discussion about how to realign things. As the county grows, you look over the last 10 years, we've got 25% more employees than we did 10 years ago. You know, 10 years from now, you gotta make it manageable. And the only way to do that is to streamline some of this. And if you look at any of the larger counties, they do exactly this. And we're at that point now where we have to start to do that. We've moved from coordinator to administrator. Now we need to look at how we're going to make things more efficient, so the administrator's job isn't so cumbersome too. So I really appreciate that, the creativity here, and hopefully it's just the beginning of more.
Yeah, I could see this growing. I think there's other departments that definitely it makes sense to try to look at them, but it's all about timing, I guess, and when the right time to move and do that kind of stuff is. And there's been some hiccups and growing pains with it, I mean, definitely, so.
Always are.
Yeah, always are, but I think each time you do it, you'll get better at it.
Yep.
But I think, I don't know, we've involved the staff quite a bit as of recently, and I think it's the right move. Your people have to have buy-in on it, or it's not. And we said that from day one, it has to make sense, not only for the county, but it has to make sense for the employees too. You can't ask them to do more and just be like, because it's the right thing to do. That's a big part of it, but it also has to make sense for them. So I think this is a good compromise where I truly do think it's a great first step. So we just have to work on the tweaking of how we want to implement it. That's the biggest thing. And we don't want to push something through and then go, oh shoot, we should have thought about that a little bit better, or, you know, now you have upset employees, which that's not the purpose of this, so.
That's why I ask, you know, for some examples, you know, it's gotta make sense to me as well, and don't do it just to do it, as other counties are combining, you know, it needs to actually streamline the operations.
Yeah, and I think the other one, like, is another big one, like our homestead applications and different things like that. That's another process that both of our offices touch. It's very manual on the recorder side. They look through deed maintenance, and we send out courtesy homestead applications. It's very manual, and so again, they look at it, they put it on a spreadsheet, we look at it on a spreadsheet, we mail out the application. It's just it can just be so much better if people have more access to different systems and more knowledge and being able to not pass things off, and it's just gonna help.
There's a lot of benefits as you described here too, and you know, one of the chief benefits for us is by getting more efficient, we're able to control the budget better. But the big ones you spelled out here is the ability to mentor more people and have upward mobility that we don't have when we have so many separate departments and not very many people in each department sometimes. it's really hard to do that. This will make that easier.
And I think when you're a staff of 10 versus a staff of 4 or a staff of 6, you can offer a lot more flexibility to your employees that you don't have otherwise. And if you're trying to be a premier employee and how do you keep up with today's markets, you have to, it's not necessarily always about money, it's about flexing time or different things, and you can do that a lot better when you have a department of 10. So,
Right, look at, I mean, I always just kind of use Jeff's office as an example. In a larger county, they all have an assistant administrator. So it makes the progression when your administrator retires or leaves, you've got sometimes a replacement sitting right there. We don't have that luxury in a small county. So if you can consolidate departments, you kind of can start creating some of that and make it easier. But when you're small little departments at a time, everybody's kind of in their silo doing their thing, it's really hard to do that. So then you're constantly pulling people from outside to come in, and you have no upward mobility inside except in your department.
the other thing that we thought was kind of progressive or really neat about this is when you think about the county in general, there's never been like a promotional schedule. You know what I mean? Like, I'm in this position until the person right above me retires, moves, or whatever. There's room for growth in this chart. If you can start out at 1, as soon as you meet the requirements at 2, you can bump to 2. If you want to get an assessor license, you can bump up to there. There's room for a promotional path, which I think could help retain employees too. So,
Thanks, Dave, that was a good idea right there. You know, that was a good idea right there about having better upward mobility.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we'll bring that, we'll let you know when we have that ready, but I would assume you'd see it in November. Other questions, comments? Any questions out there? Okay. Well, that's why we invited all the staff to be here too, so if they had questions, they actually had an open forum to ask them. But you guys are planning on having a meeting later this week when we work this out, this week or next? Okay.
thanks guys.
All right, thanks. Now we got the budget.
So here's
So you have a copy of the,
in the last 4 years, that's how many we've added to each department. So before we start the
Yep.
budget, Jeff, I'm
Mhm.
just gonna pass this on to the board for information. So in the last 4 years, we've added 8 people to the sheriff's department, 6 to social services, 3 to solid waste, 2 to IT, 2 to Jonathan's, 1.5 to transit, 1 to ESO, 1 to highway, 0.5 to recorder, and 0.5 for administrator staff.
Yeah, more than that.
No, it comes up to, no, it doesn't include the new ones. So it was 25.5 positions, and this is 25.5 positions. And Dave, you brought up a really good point on how much we've increased in the last.
Well, yeah, if you count this year's proposals, I mean, social service alone, that's 9 new positions in 4 years.
Yeah, that's crazy. Even if it's funded.
Yeah. The sheriff is a close second.
It's no taxpayer money.
It is. It might not be at our level, but it's at some
Coming
level.
somewhere.
Yeah.
so this is my working document relative to the truth and taxation meeting. So, some of the actual details, you've got additional handouts for, but, I'm gonna start with the county comparisons again. Commissioner Christensen brought up the form here that I was gonna mention. I have some of the highlights from last year's comparisons and from that form in here. Got a bit of the staffing history that you had just mentioned and the number of positions and the change in the labor budget.
Thank you, by the way, for
Mhm.
bringing this to us, Jeff. That was very good.
Gina put that one together.
Yep, thank you.
Levy summary, I did some, kind of a smattering of the tax impacts of the proposed levy, so you can see that. I gotta work with a broader, work with Maria and Kay to get kind of a broader impact across the rest of them, but I just did a smattering for this one. And then next steps. So this Minnesota County comparison, we looked at the first 4 lines on here, came from a survey of counties last year, that the levy per capita ranged from $329 to $1,964, and with a median of $782 and an average of $805, and Hubbard County is lower than the median and continues to be. Part of that is related to the tax rate. In 2022, the number of employees per thousand, it speaks to need for services. It speaks to, how are we growing? The range from 4.91 to 23.3. Well, this number is very affected by population. So in the highly populated counties, the number of employees per thousand is lower. And in like Traverse County, where they have 3,800 employees, I think that's the number, that's 23. They have 23 employees per thousand residents, but they only have 3,800 residents. So a median of 9.24, an average of 10.37. Hubbard County is just above that. And then from the chart that Commissioner Christensen this just passed out, the 23 net tax county rate in Hubbard County was 33.3, 18th lowest in the state. Based on the 24 proposed levy, the tax rate will actually go down another few points. You're going to see why that is. It's primarily because the market is increasing faster than the levy, which is good and bad, right? But the proposed tax rate at 6.8% would be 30.5%, and we'll see how that plays out in a couple of examples in a bit here.
So I'm not sure how we want to relay that beyond what you're saying there
Mhm.
when we talk to the public. Because it's hard to grasp that, I think, in a conversation when you're sitting out there and you're looking at your taxes and you're thinking, why am I paying all this?
Yep.
But when you look at this sheet,
Mhm.
I mean, really, the residents are in a really good spot.
So I hate to make this comparison because it's kind of taking a cheap shot at a neighbor.
Uh-huh.
But if you think that the tax capacity on a home up to $500,000 is 1%. The county, the overall county tax rate should be 1%. But ours is a third of that, right? So instead of paying paying 1% of your value, and when I talk to people about this, they get that. You've got a $250,000 home, you pay $2,500 in county taxes. Here you pay a third of that. In Wadena, you pay 80% of that. Or pick a number and use those comparisons for the regional counties, in that, it's just the county, and it's not the whole tax rate, but it has a big impact on the whole tax rate, right? Aside from the city of Park Rapids, countywide total tax bills are low primarily because we have a strong economy, we have a lot of commerce, a lot of industry, a lot of the seasonal homes, and the value of those homes help a significant amount, right?
And those are all located outside of the city.
They're all located, well, not all, there's
No,
some,
but-
there's some
but a
right there,
lot of
but
them
yeah,
are
most of them are
located
outside of the
outside.
city.
Yep.
Yep,
And some residents, of course, that are on a fixed income or aren't getting the wage increases that some people are, would still be, we could say all this and it probably would make sense, but they're still seeing that they're being
Yep.
burdened by
Right.
higher taxes.
Right.
yep. So there's a lot of different ways to speak about that. If you need more, this is a really good one to have handy. I got a copy of this at the Fall Policy Conference. They had it in the general government meeting. And it's good information to have.
I noticed a neighboring county to the north where they're at,
Mhm.
my district, this will help.
Yeah, and aren't they about double? Aren't they 60-some%?
Yeah, it was really something, wasn't it?
Yeah, they're way down there,
Yeah.
$1,275 where we're at 787,
Yep.
84.
Just across the border.
There's two ways to explain that. One is a strong economy that supports the tax needed to provide services, and two is good fiscal management, and Hubbard County has a history of both. So that works really well. Kind of the meat and the potatoes of what drives the budget is, of course, staff. I think we talked about this, and I'll get the new numbers for the proposed 24. But in 2016, 2017, the Hubbard County levy equaled the compensation budget for the county. It was 100% of the compensation budget. Over the last number of years, we've gotten down to 81 or 82% of the compensation budget. And that gets to be challenging because we may get dollars for roads and we may get dollars relative to paying back for the time studies that we do in social services. And we get revenue from a lot of different sources. But the thing we usually have to cover is the wages and benefits, the compensation for the county employees. So that's a number that I always look at as that ratio of the levy to the compensation budget. And the thing that's going to continue to change that is, we've got cost of living built into our contracts. We've got step increases for those who are eligible built into the contracts. We've got increasing costs relative to health insurance. Those things are kind of indexed. The wild card is how many new employees are we adding, and how does that change the picture? Looking back over the number of years, yes, it's changed a lot, but percentage-wise, it hasn't. That doesn't mean we don't have to be cautious about it. It just means that it hasn't had, the number of employees hasn't had the same financial impact from one year to the next.
So if I may add something, at the Prime West meeting, they talked about how there are so many more reports that have to be filed. I think they said a third of the year of their staff is spent filling out reports that when they talk to the organization on the phone, CMS or whatever, you can tell they haven't even read them. And the legislatures have no idea what's in the reports. So some of these, because I get frustrated, you think the computer's supposed to streamline stuff, and yet we continue to, have to add staff. But part of these things are out of our control with reporting, I believe.
Some are. I think the biggest challenge as I see it, and I've supported some of these changes and made recommendation that you should approve some, but we have this annual process where we go through the budget and we come up and we say, what new positions do we need for next year? The bigger challenge is the positions we've added midterm, right? Because we don't really take a look all the way around those positions as we do them. We just kind of do them because there's a need for it. A year and a half ago when our jail population was high and we needed to add those 6 positions, we didn't really have a choice. B, it didn't really go through a rigorous budget process. It just kind of happened. We've added positions in social services the same way in the time that I've been here. So this running list, and you have a longer copy, this running list for 24 has the new position requests. For 23, it shows the new position requests and the positions that were added midstream during the year. And you can see that history play out on the rest of that sheet that you have. I think it goes back to 2017, 2018.
2020.
Was that one just go to 2020? We can go back further. We have more data than that.
Okay.
So this one goes back to 2013. The orange line is the actual number of FTE, and this isn't, in the orange line is the actual. So we can run a report out of payroll that shows us how many hours we paid by department, add them all up, and then the next slide is going to show us the dollars we paid, actual versus budgeted. So you can see, obviously, in 2019, we budgeted low and we had high. In 2020, COVID was just kind of a goofy thing. Typically, we are budgeting a little bit high and underspending on actual relative to compensation. This year, we made the change in 2024 that in social services, we did the calculation, we know what the number is, and then we cut it to 97% for the budget. Because of the number of vacancies we always carry in that department, we never get to that. Now, in the sheriff's office and corrections, it's just the opposite. We have all those vacancies, but we have to have people at the dispatch, and we have to have them in the jail, so we pay overtime. So when we're understaffed in the jail, it actually costs us more. So, and those two, 70, 75 employees in each of those departments, well, it's 40%. Trying to do the number, 150, 250, 40% of our total staff in those two departments. In the balance of them, you know, highway department being the next largest and solid waste, if they're short a person for a day or somebody's on vacation, everybody else just picks it up. There's overtime due to snow, or there's overtime due to other staffing issues, but there's less of that. So they usually are underspending by 1% or 2% on their wage budget too. This is the annual payroll over a 12-year period. And if you take an average of this, it's averaging 4.9% each year. And when you think about the fact that we have 2%, 3%, or 4% COLAs built in, and we have 3% steps built in, they're not additive. You don't add 4% to 3% and get 7. You do get higher, but when you have turnover, you're often replacing people at a lower grade than you were previously. Sometimes we're replacing people at a higher grade than what we were paying, depending on the market and how that goes. But payroll compensation budget has increased at about 4.9% annually. The number of FTE has increased at 2.2% annually. So 1% on 200 is 2%, 2% is 4.5. So if you run that line, it's not an awful trend, but we have to be judicious with the addition of all of those, and I think we need to test those positions even more. Like I said, in social services, we're gonna get an opportunity to talk with them about their positions at the work session next month. I have asked Brian and Michael to put together more detail, more data, and, you know, impact. We gotta talk about impact, we gotta talk about caseloads, and we have to talk about dollars and cents. So we need to weigh all of those things.
Will you ask them to also come prepared to talk about where they're sitting for transit drivers?
Yes. Talk about the
That's one
strength of their
big
program.
funding, yeah,
Yep.
thank you. It's part of Prime West's agenda.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I need to follow up with Brian to find out how our new transit coordinator is doing. I think he's been there about a month or 2. So this you've seen. This is the 24 levy summary, showing 20.4 million at 6.8%. We know we've got opportunities relative to that. In November, I'll bring some recommendations of where we think we can go with that, and then you'll of course come back and say, well, here's our target, right? So this is not new. And this, I'm sorry,
Well, it would be new, because right now you're not showing any shortfall from the target of 6.8%.
I am and I'm not. So when I'm showing the proposed levy, it's coming up at 20.766, and we know our target is 20.4. So we do have a shortfall to make up.
Okay,
But I'm also showing an addition to the fund balance in the general fund, and if I take those two numbers and swap them out, we're about $60,000 away from being balanced. Relative to capital, there's some capital in here primarily from law enforcement, that body scanner that they're proposing, and some of the additional items. The $150,000 for radios that we kind of approved to be split over 3 years, that's in there. There was another $100,000 for another item. We took that $70,000 for the pickup for STS out and told Corey to just buy that out of this year's other accounts, not general fund. But I'll be bringing, I'm still waiting for the public safety dollars that were committed by the 2023 legislature. We're supposed to have them by December 1st. So if those make sense to buy some of the 2024 capital that they need, we'll buy them at $23 and take them right out of the budget. It'll reduce that. Of course, then, you know, that's not the only thing we could spend those public safety dollars on. I was talking at the MACA conference last week, and a couple of different counties have created workforce training programs for high school students, where they've created an academy for people to learn how to be a dispatcher or get interested in public safety careers. And I think it'd be fantastic to take some of that money that we've got coming in for that and start a program, work with the school to start a program, like the nursing home staffing program that they have at the school, that's, you know, providing training and providing internships and providing opportunities for people to learn that skill.
They're also doing childcare now.
And I'd be willing to bet that Crystal would be happy to work on something relative to public safety. And the issue would be funding. So if we took 5 or 10% of that allocation and used it to fund a program for a couple, 3 years, I think it would probably be a good idea. But I'll work that proposal through. I don't think we want to take that money and throw it against operating for 1 year, because then the next year, that operating is just a big hole again. But if we can offset one-time costs that will set us up to be more productive in the future, I think it'd be a good idea. So this is what a summary budget would look like. Again, you see the 20.766, but the target is 20.4. This is what when you look at the state auditor's office and you look at summary budget reports, these are the lines you see. You just see expenses, revenues, and levy.
But if we want the levy lower than 6.8%,
Yep,
we have to decrease more.
we will.
I got a sheet here, you wanted a copy of that, of
Yep.
a couple of ideas of.
If you have some ideas, I would definitely take those. Like I said, in November, I'll try to work those in, staff recommendations to knock that number down.
Maybe after the meeting, you can take a copy of it.
I'm sorry?
After the meeting, you can take a
Yes,
copy of it.
yep.
Of that, okay.
So these are typical reports. You know, we had we show an expenditure budget of $53 million, and 25% is in road and bridge, 20% is in sheriff's office, 20% is in social services, 20% is general. The one I find to be helpful is when we look at our revenue from other sources. You know, we're funding about 33 to 34% of our budget with our levy, and the rest of it is coming from other sources. Whether that is sales tax for transportation, gas tax that come in to support transportation, all the money that comes in from the federal government through the state to support social service programs. Yes, it's all supported by taxes somewhere.
I was just thinking that.
But only about 34% is coming from, you know, so how does my tax dollar get spent? Well, that's on the next slide. How does my tax dollar get spent? 40% is going to law enforcement, which hasn't changed. 18% for the general fund, 17% for road and bridge, 15% for social services. People often have a misconception that all their dollars are going into welfare or something like that, but it depends on how you look at it. But if you took a dollar bill and spread this out and say, what am I getting for my tax dollar? 40% of that is, half of that 40% is funding the sheriff's office, and half of that is funding the jail. And funding jails is really expensive. We know that.
We definitely got some work to do, and I'm interested to hear Tom's ideas.
I am too.
Because there's still a couple requests to come in for budgets yet, and then I really do think personally we need to control the FTEs to some degree. And just looking at the 4 increases, just in my mind, I could probably support 2, but I don't know how we could support 4 at this time. If we keep going at this clip, we're going to pay the piper.
Well, then everything we're doing in law enforcement and social services is dragging the attorney's office with us, so. We added one to the attorney's office this year, mid-year. We got a request for another one next year, which I said I fully support, because adding another county attorney without adding support staff for that attorney. And I had this conversation with Michael, the adult services supervisor. It doesn't make sense to have people making $50 an hour doing $20 an hour work. So you have to have the right combination of staff to make that work. That feels again like the tail wagging the dog sometimes, but that's why I specifically asked them both Brian and Michael to come with caseload history, because we need to understand what's going on in the community and who's eligible for services and who's applying for services and how that's changed over time. I'd like to see that trend line relative to the staffing trend line and the funding trend line, because I think that helps you to see whether, if you're gonna say 2 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 3 for social services, it'll help you identify which one is most important, having those 3 different trend lines.
You know, it was just 2, 3 years ago, we addressed the caseload issue by adding some staff there. So I can't imagine it's higher than it could be, but I can't imagine it's higher than it was 2 or 3 years ago, so.
I don't know either, which is why I wanna get
Yeah.
a 5-year history of that so we can see it.
But we're never gonna meet, I would say never, but, it's really hard to meet the guidelines that everybody says we should meet, because it's really hard to meet those
Yep.
in the case. We've never met them in a long time.
When
We're
we
better
did,
than we were.
when we did add those, positions to social services, did we do that in 23? Let's see.
Your sheet-
21, we added 1, and in 22, we added 2. I don't remember if it was in 20, it must have been in 21 or 22. We had the highest caseloads out of all of the counties involved in Prime West.
And so we hired 2,
Yeah,
and we drove those back down some.
yeah.
And now where are they today, is the question. But if they haven't gone up substantially to the point where they're higher than they were when we hired the 2 previously,
And
I
even
don't think we
relative,
have to do it right now.
and even relative to all the other counties in Prime West, where are we at for
Yep.
caseload?
Yeah, we need all that data.
Yeah.
Not, to make the determination as if it's gotta be 1 or 2 of the 3 that are proposed, that'll help inform which ones are most critical relative to serving the community and to, minimizing the financial impact.
So then Brian has to look at, the way he was proposing realigning, his department made sense. Which one, if it's 1 out of 3, which one of these positions starts you down that path to
Yep.
make sense with your realignment?
Now, I know one case history, in Cook, before I got there, they had 16 total people in their Health and Human Services Department. When I left there, they had 27. Now, they added 5 of those before I got there and 5 in the time that I was there. The levy to support the 16 was the same as the levy to support the 26, because the need and the reimbursement rates meant that they were leaving money on the table and underserving the community with 16. They were serving the community and capturing all the revenue that was available for them to capture, so that even adding $1 million to payroll, they were getting by on the same levy. So there is a sweet spot relative to revenue recapture and service, and we need the data to be able to evaluate that.
And I appreciate what you're saying, but what we talked about earlier is those dollars still come from taxing
Yes, they do.
somewhere.
They do, and there's always our share, no matter how you do it.
Mhm.
None of it's 100%.
No. No, but if we're, yeah, having unmet needs in our community creates additional problems. And it's one of those things where if there's federal money available for that and we don't spend it, someone else will. So
I know,
it's
from
a
the
real
caveat of
balance.
that though is it just then keeps going up,
Okay,
up, up
yeah.
and up. I get all
And it's not
that.
always easy to quantify that.
The problem I've been kind of hearing is, with social services wise, is they have to spend so much time providing a paper trail for the state to track it,
Yep.
Yeah,
that they
That's
aren't
right.
serving the public as well as they should be serving them. And it's a disservice, I feel, to the residents.
Well, for the years I've been watching it, rather than evaluating that workflow at the state, they just throw one more layer on top of one more layer of reporting. And it just,
and that's what Jim says at Prime West, the legislature will pass another layer, and he said they have all the information down at the bottom layer, but because no one's looking at any of the layers, they just continue to
Yeah.
add layer upon layer.
And whether it's in education, childcare, healthcare, they do the same thing across all of them. And nobody hardly ever looks at reducing that burden, which is just as effective sometimes as giving money. Sometimes it's better because then it gets taken care of by either the private sector or something else, a heck of a lot more efficient.
if there was a point of focus at the state that I would like to see, it would be in in cutting through the red tape relative to delivering human service functions. We could,
So this came up yesterday at MRC about drainage ditches? Tom, do you remember the whole story? There was two large drainage issues in the state of Minnesota. And they've been brought forth over and over and over. But it's acknowledged that if they fix those two, they wouldn't need the number of staff.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we can't do that then.
That's right, so they continue being ignored year after year, even though
course.
that department has admitted if they would fix those two, it would pretty much take care of everything.
Of course.
they're down in southern Minnesota. So you're aware of this. This is here primarily because this is the Truth in Taxation slideshow. This next one I think is a little interesting, and it's, the tax capacity driven by the increasing markets the last couple of years has increased significantly. The levy has increased much slower relative to that, although we understood the increase there, and that shows the overall impact on the tax rate. So it's just combining those three things for a conversation about that. When we have, of the 6.8% projected or offered in the initial levy, 3.8% is new growth, right? So that capture doesn't hit anybody who didn't change their property. The 3% hits everybody on there.
Part you have to be careful about here is, if valuations drop 10 or 20%.
Just what I was gonna say,
Mhm.
yep.
Then, your tax rate's gonna go up.
Yep.
So you can't grow too fast.
Yep.
You can end up upside down if it's an anomaly.
I would have to go back and look, 2008 when we had that last.
Yeah, I would be curious to see.
I'm guessing that the number of seasonal parcels means that the city of Monoman in 2008 went from $800,000 of estimated market value, or of tax capacity, to 500,000. It almost lost half of its value, so your tax rate just shoots. With 8,000 seasonal parcels, and the demand for those even in tough times, and I'd be willing to bet that the bounce here was significantly less. I know it was in Cook County. I know it was less than a 10% dip. So you're right. This market value is kind of a made-up inflated value that creates these other two numbers. But for the point of comparison, the real value is our county taxes are lower than the ones in the surrounding communities. That's true.
And Hubbard County really is in a sweet spot, because we have real estate that people all over the country want.
Mhm.
And few counties have that, really.
50% homestead, 50% seasonal. I think that's the third highest in the state. Oh, I'm gonna go back to that because I had some notes here. And the notes were, over this period, the tax capacity has increased 74%, 11% annually, but primarily in the last 2 years. The 40% increase in property tax levy is spread out at 5.5% over those years. And the decrease in the county tax rate over that same period has been almost 4% annually. Again, driven by markets. So these are the first stab at doing some tax impacts. And again, some of these are high, the higher value ones are higher than the lower value ones, because a 23% increase in the estimated market value is different on 600,000 than it is on 200,000. But we also didn't see the increases on the $200,000 homes. So if we look at the homestead for 600, that went to 741, estimated market value 23, county tax share 8.6. So there, again, there's a bit of a shift because the higher valued homes are increasing faster than the lower valued homes. And you need to know this when you're thinking about impacts when you determine what final levy to set. From 480 to 550, These EMVs are real numbers off of people's valuation notices from this spring. And then the county tax is a calculation of that 30.5% based off of that. So we've got a $249,000 home that only went up 2%. And because of the change in from 33 to 30%, their taxes, county taxes actually go down by $40 a year.
Is it possible, Kay, to run a sheet that says, you know, X amount of houses are worth over 750 in the county? You know, so you take all the properties, not houses, but you take the properties and then, because if you look at what's offered on the housing market right now, there's hardly anything offered at the lower end.
Between,
I may have some reports that would show that, or.
Don't spend a lot of time at it. I was just curious if you could.
I'm hoping to get a broader perspective on the tax impacts. And I'd have to work with Maria's staff and with Kay to get those PRISM reports and do that.
And what percentage of those $250,000 homes or less are rental?
Yeah,
Kinda
that's the other
interesting,
thing.
too.
Yep.
Because over 50% of the property in Hubbard County is rentals.
The assessors might already have a query that they.
Okay.
I think they
Okay.
do. So I'll work with them to try to quantify that, and then we'll have to work with Kay on tax rates to calculate estimated taxes.
I think I can locate the 2008 and 2009, some in there for tax rates. That's would be really interesting.
It would be. And even, we bought originally in 2005 at the height of the market. So even if you compare it 2005 to 2008, it would be interesting.
So then the next steps are whatever you want to see. You know what, we're going to bring you in November. Commissioner Kruger, you had a list. Do you want to review that now and then give me a copy so we can start working on it, or?
I would just simply
For-
take
for
the
the
line
point-
by line look.
Oh,
That's what it is.
okay. But so you have a copy of that I can take back to my
Yeah.
office and work
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. And then maybe a couple more items in the sheriff's department going, instead of the part of the regular budget, shifting it over to capital improvements.
Okay,
Some things like that. But, yeah, I can give you a copy and
okay.
we can go over it. Just some line by line items, just, you know, like in some departments, some travel and meals things just jumped way higher, and you look back at what they were doing in 2022, 2023, pretty large jump, and I
Okay.
was just wondering.
Yeah, we can certainly
So
compare
it's line
trends.
by line.
Yep.
Yep.
Appreciate your work on that, Tom.
Would part of that be the policy change implemented in 2023 on travel reimbursements?
For that high of a increase, I don't know.
When we did change the policy from the meal reimbursement to the GSA reimbursement. That could account for some of that, but we'll take a look.
Okay.
The other thing you don't want to miss in the budget is the question we had regarding the benefit that was taken away from commissioners and replacing.
Yes, yep.
I'm going to work that in somewhere so we know what it looks like.
We discussed it at the last couple of personnel committee meetings. We'll bring a number in November so we can discuss it once before we can add that to the November work session, but we'll deal with it in personnel first of the month, so we can add that with a good conversation for December.
When I'm thinking conversation about levy impacts, you know, it's one thing about what the county does for their levy, and then if you've been reading what the cities have had to do, you know, anything that we can lower on the county side to help the people even living in the cities, because what a shock.
I was just talking with somebody yesterday who lives in the city, and they're wondering how they're gonna keep
Yeah.
owning the place.
Yeah.
And they didn't do anything to their home.
No, it's just, man.
You just can't
You see that
tax
in a
people
lot,
out of their homes, that is wrong.
see that in a lot of the rural cities.
Yep.
That's a real challenge when you have 150 people and you need to spend $1 million on water and sewer infrastructure, or $5 million on water and sewer infrastructure. And I'm gonna pull this up because I think it's really interesting. I've always found this to be interesting.
That's why I took that line by line look, because I don't wanna tax people out of their homes.
Yeah.
This is a calculator that kind of shows, I don't even know who Smart Asset is, but I think it's, so this average county tax rate is not the county tax rate. That's the total tax bill for, if you put in, it's gonna show 80%. So on $500,000, you pay $4,000 in taxes. Now, that's an average. If you're in the city, you're gonna pay double that, because I think their rate is about 1.5. If you look at Minnesota, the average is 51, a little over 1%, and national, it's almost 1%. But if you go, Beltrami County is 20% higher. So it's interesting to look at. You can actually, I think, scroll down to the bottom, and I think they have, at one point, they have a chart that shows county by county what the impacts are, and puts it in a spreadsheet so you can play with it a little bit. Because when we talk about county tax impact, right, then you have to talk about the local tax and the school tax and the other specials. This one averages all that together, so you're kind of getting a look at it. When we see an 80% tax rate for Hubbard County, we know that's not right, but that's the average impact throughout the county. So anyway, I always find that to be an interesting worksheet.
So trying to think ahead a little bit to this economic development thing is, if we get that grant for that housing project, is there a match that that we've already come up with, or that we may have to come up with in 2024 if we get that grant?
There's the possibility, I'm meeting with Mary this afternoon to quantify, we kind of have this 1/3 set aside for current capital, 1/3 for future capital, and 1/3 for economic development. I've asked her to project out a couple of years what the economic development impacts would be, including the possibility of supporting something like that, or supporting additional housing trust fund projects, or whatever that would be. She's supposed to be getting that to me this week, so we can have that when she's here next week talking about her budget.
Because there's still some unspent economic development funds from '23, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and might be wise just to kind of hold that.
Sock them away, yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we get that congressionally designated fund, I am willing to bet that there's gonna be a 20-30% overrun on $3 million that we would wanna find a way to fund between us and the city, rather than turn that back. So if it's,
And then if we increase the HRA levy or the library or whatever, how will that all play into this?
any of those adjustments are really, the requests are included. If the requests have changed since what we got
So
in
you
July.
didn't include all those?
Yeah, we changed the numbers to the best information we had in July.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
I don't know that we put the full boat on for HRA, but I think they've already backed off on half of that.
Yep.
Relative to creating a funding program, because we do have the Housing Trust Fund. They could apply for dollars and not have to get it directly through levy, so.
And by the way, just for information, the HRA could not get any money from Mojave, because if Mojave gave them money for those 2 apartments at Cornerstone, then Mojave would be able, Mojave's clients would have to always be in those apartments for a longer, or it wasn't just a short term, it was long term. So they decided not to take those dollars.
Well, yeah, that was the only real concern I had, was because that's a big deal to get that done if it ends up coming down the pipe. And I know we got Deep Lake Park already committed, just sitting there, ready to go, so.
Did Corey tell you that he got a number from Gordon's relative to estimated demo for that?
You mentioned it, you didn't give us a number, but you said last week you had a number.
If they will do it for the number they gave us, I would do it right now.
Yeah.
But I want to wait and find out if we've got that grant so that we can allocate that against it. But yeah, it's a good number. It's really close to what we had budgeted for it.
For all the demo?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw the itemized list based on this building, amphitheater, these other buildings. Yeah,
Well, that's good news.
if we don't get the grant, I may make the recommendation to do it next year anyway, just to be done with it.
Yeah, start using the park.
Yeah, and then we can move forward.
Then we could actually start using the park,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah,
Yep.
It's just sitting there now.
Yeah.
So, other items? We'll get a copy of your list. If anybody else has specific questions, certainly happy to entertain them. I've not been wanting to print you the 109-page sheet again. Probably sometime just before Thanksgiving. We'll have if we have the changes relative to the assessor recorder office, if we've been able to do some modification in there, you'll have a new one before TNT. It's just a matter of a week before or 2 weeks before.
Does anybody need it printed anyhow, or are you good just reading it off the computer and making notes? Yeah, that'd be good.
I didn't hear what was
Who
said.
likes a hard copy?
I didn't hear what was said.
Of the 109-page full budget, who likes a hard copy versus a,
For me, digital would be fine.
Isn't that what this is?
yes?
Yeah, because we can take this copy and make changes.
Modify it.
Yep. Okay, well, then, we'll send it digitally. If you want a hard copy, let us know. Ted would like a hard copy.
Yes, please.
Or just the pages that are
Yeah,
changed,
Pages that were changed.
so we can supplement into this.
Yeah, that's almost harder,
Okay, all right.
because it's it's printed front and back, and sometimes they
Yeah,
change
yeah.
page
Okay,
pagination
all right.
throughout there when you rerun it, so. But we'll update the summary too, and we'll try to keep a list of what changed.
I'll have to get a bigger computer screen.
A 17 or 23-inch monitor helps a lot when you're looking at budgets,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
so.
I just have one question. The proposed jail addition remodel, is that being thought of as a referendum or bonding, or is there any
So
thoughts about what's gonna happen?
we're gonna have a conversation about that next week. I had a conversation with Bruce Schwartzman from BKV to be here at General Government next week, and then I realized that you were not on that committee. So I'm suggesting that we cancel General Government and we have that agenda wrapped in at the end of our meeting, so that everybody's here to hear. What Bruce will have is he'll have a proposal for the architectural design work necessary for the next steps. What I propose that we do is that when we get done with our regular meeting, that we take a tour of the facilities, because I know you haven't had a recent tour. Everybody else has. If you want to go with, and then we'll come back at 11 o'clock and we'll have Bruce join us via video. And then we'll go over that and we can ask all those questions. Typically, if it's something on a capital projects list, it's not a referendum. It is general obligation debt. There is an opportunity, if the board approves a general obligation bond, there's always the possibility of a reverse referendum. It doesn't happen very often when that's the case. But generally, that's why counties have capital improvement plans, is anything on the capital improvement plan has the ability to be funded by GO and not go through referendum. So I know you had questions relative to the design and all that, and I wanted to make an opportunity to do a tour. And I think Corey and Joe are on deck for being able to give a tour sometime next Tuesday. I'm thinking it would be like 10:15, 10:30, and then we come back here and bring Bruce on board. He'd review the project scope, and then he would review what their proposal is relative to taking it to the next phase. And I wouldn't bring that to the board for a decision till November. So you'll have the information, you'll have time to think about it. You'll see the schedule, and we'll answer specific questions about that. But thanks for reminding me, because I wanted to address the fact that we're gonna change that schedule for general government, and just roll it into the regular meeting. That way I don't have to notice general government as a separate meeting. We'll have a break to take that tour for anybody that's interested, and then we'll come back.
One of you mentioned, I don't remember who it was, that it would be interesting to sit through intakes, like on a Friday night there, to see how that works. So I actually mentioned that to Corey, but due to data privacy, we cannot do that.
There's some challenges. It'd be good to see it on a Friday when it's busy, as opposed to a Tuesday when
Yeah,
You can see how small and inadequate it is, but you can't see it in the context of what's happening.
yeah, but we can't see who they're bringing in.
Yep.
Was a great idea, whoever thought of it.
We
Well,
could,
then they'll just be on the in-custody picture the following day.
Yeah,
I know,
That's
but
all.
he said they can't do
I
that.
realize that,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fine.
But that would have been really helpful to
Yeah.
try understand.
sometimes it's how you ask the question. I might ask that question again.
Okay, you ask it again.
But that's all I have for you unless there's other items. The AMC District 2 meeting is next Wednesday up in Beltrami County.
Yeah, I have a Prime West meeting, so I won't be there.
I've got airport commission in the morning.
I'll be there.
I'm planning on attending.
Two of us.
And I really appreciate all of this written down. This is nice to have on paper.
I think the history relative to the staffing is really important to have that context. And like I said, Brian's been messaging me saying, okay, what do we need to have and how do we have to present it? And I'll review that with him, make sure we have that for you in November, which is coming right around the corner. Okay, if anybody has questions, let me know, thoughts or ideas.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we're adjourned.